Last week, as we recap the super fight between Islam Makhachev and Alexander Volkanovski, we also mentioned the accusation by Volkanovski's teammate, Dan Hooker, towards Makhachev and his alleged use of an IV. Since then, we've heard from the different parties involved, including Makhachev himself, who denied using an IV. This discussion kind of carried on throughout the week, and no proof was submitted by Hooker or Team Volkanovski. However, this seemed like a serious enough accusation that it warranted an update, and hopefully will bring closure to what was a great fight between these two pound-for-pound greats. Let's start with the man himself, who was on site covering UFC 284 for MMA Junkie, Mike Bond. Mike, man, what did you think of all this? I mean, you probably were exhausted from the show. Sure didn't need this on your plate.
Yeah, it was a nice little hangover storyline from the event, right? But I think you laid it out pretty well there, George. And I think what you said is critical. There's been no critical or clear or legitimate evidence brought forward to prove that any of these accusations are true. So that's the thing that we just need to kind of repeat over and over. It's just a lot of he said, she said type of stuff. You listen to the interview that Eugene Behrman did with Ariel Helwani a few days after the event talking about it. And he was like, oh, like, you know, we heard kind of something, but it wasn't like, you know, the full story. It wasn't quite enough to go off. It might have even been his teammate, Zubair Tuhugov, who missed weight on that card and was on the first fight of the night. So like they didn't even seem to know whatever information that got shared or leaked to Volkanovski's side. They didn't seem to be overly confident with it, and he didn't seem too happy, Eugene Behrman, that Dan Hooker went out and tweeted those things. He pretty much told them not to, but he said, you know, Dan's his own man, and he decided to go that way, and he was doubling down on it and insisting on it. But when people asked for the receipts, which, you know, he seemed to claim he had, there was nothing brought forward by him. So it almost feels like end of story there. I mean, obviously, you're not allowed to take an IV use of any kind down in Australia under that commission. Maybe the only positive you could say that came out of this was like we learned a little bit more about USADA's protocols and the fact that apparently you are allowed to take up to 100 milligrams of an IV following a weigh-in as long as it's administered by like a legitimate doctor or, you know, you have the right, take the right steps to make it happen. And one of the other things I guess I want to say is there's this photo going around of like Islam Makhachev from fight week where he seemed to have, you know, some bruising around his inner arm. And we need to make it clear that that photo was taken on the Wednesday of the fight week when he was doing his pre-fight photo shoot. Go look at the actual photo. It wasn't after the fight. His face would have been banged up. And according to his manager, Rusdan Magomedov, who told me like that was from the photo shoot on the Wednesday where they took a blood sample, the commission, ahead of the fight. So that kind of explains it to me there. You look at the post-fight photo that I took after the press conference where he's standing there. You can't see anything on his arms. So the timeline doesn't make sense to me. The facts don't add up. It's just an accusation that got thrown out there that seemed to really explode. I guess the only thing that you can really say is questionable was that tweet from Ali Abdelaziz that got deleted where he said something about like 3 to 4 liters of use. But I mean, you guys, like, all due respect to Ali and everything, I think maybe pointing to his Twitter as the beacon of insight or legitimacy maybe wouldn't be the most appropriate step. He probably spoke out of turn, and that's why he removed the tweet. But right now, you're going to need to give me something more than just hearsay for me to actually believe and throw heap on Islam Makhachev and then go down the whole road of talking about should this be overturned, should anything like that happen as a result of all this.
Yeah, and to be fair, Volkanovski seems to already be pivoting towards, hey, I just want a rematch in Abu Dhabi. This was such a great fight, goes, and it was kind of marred by this, you know, because we all sat around, like Mike said, waiting for the receipts, waiting to see if something was there, and if it was, then obviously we would opine, you know, about it and how what a poor choice he may have made and the repercussions. And yet here we are now trying to kind of make up for it. All due respect to Makhachev, who did have a successful title defense. It's just that it didn't seem to go like as it should. You know, the winner reaps the benefits of a super fight like that.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a mess. I mean, considering how great of an event, how great of a fight it was, it did kind of get marred by that little situation there, which is very strange, you know, because Dan Hooker, he's never really been a guy that you would think would be somebody that would go out and just spout things out of his mouth without any sort of evidence. But yeah, after a couple days go by and you hear nothing to follow up on what he said, it really is kind of a black eye on the whole situation. I think an apology probably is warranted, something, some kind of statement, because you can't just go on and say these type of things if you don't have the receipts to prove them. I mean, think about think about if there was any merit to this, like the situation that that would create for a fight like this, a situation where a guy moves up in weight, right, to fight for another belt. What a mess we would be left with. It really did kind of have the MMA community going nuts for a couple days, but you know, if everybody's kind of like the way I am and the way I think, after a couple days go by, if you don't hear any evidence, you just kind of see what things are, and that's just Dan Hooker just must have been really pissed off, man. And he has a little bit of a history with Islam Makhachev, but I think the situation might have just gotten the best of him, where I think cooler heads could have prevailed in the situation.
You're right, Goes. We all do move on, but that thing lives on the internet, you know, and not everyone uh clears him right away. Like
Mhm.
I bet you some people, I mean, I already see some people in the chat thinking that it's still ongoing, and we're trying to give you all the information we have. Nolan, share your thoughts on this. I think you also had some stuff to add to differentiate. Like Mike said, we have USADA, which obviously that's the testing body that the UFC uses, but actually in different commissions, I guess they may have some stuff that works with them and outside of them. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the Combat Sport Commission of Western Australia gave us and other media outlets a statement about this, saying that they have no evidence that anyone, crossed their rules or WADA rules. So for me, at this point in time, I really don't think that the ball is in Islam Makhachev's court to prove that he's innocent, like that he didn't do something. I think you need, obviously, to the other side, the side accusing Dan Hooker and everybody from that team who's brought this up. They need to provide evidence. This isn't, Islam doesn't have to provide evidence he didn't do something that there's no evidence that he did. So really all signs have pointed towards, this being a non-issue. It's kind of unfortunate, with all signs pointing towards there being no evidence that he's had to deal with this. I think kind of in the wake of this whole fight, which was fantastic, I think we can all agree. I do feel like this is just contributing to kind of some disrespect towards Islam. I think a lot of it was unintentional. Like I was on here a couple weeks ago praising Volkanovski, or last week, talking about how great he was. But I don't think there's enough focus on how good Islam did that night. And then to have this come in and kind of mar everything a little bit more, it's just kind of unfortunate. The guy has the biggest win of his career to date, and this is all going on. But there'll always be the trolls. But I think at this point in time, most reasonable people that have followed the story know that until there's evidence provided, there's no sign that he did anything out of the realm of what he was supposed to.
Yeah.